Hello and welcome to another episode of the Blackside podcast, a podcast of, for, and by Black people in the UK. With me on this episode is Tari Rusere. I will just pass the spotlight over to you. Over to you, Tari.
Okay, well, as Chukwudi kindly introduced me, I'm Tari Rusere. So I'm originally from Zimbabwe, and I currently work in the telecoms industry.
All right, thank you. Generally, we'll be talking about Black History Month, which coincides with the launch of the Blackside podcast, or the Blackside podcast coincides with Black History Month, whichever way you want to figure it. So we'll be talking this month, for the next few episodes at least, we'll be talking about Black History Month and Black identity in the UK. And so to that end, I think we should talk about, at least in general, what are your thoughts about Black History Month as a Black person in the UK?
That's a good question. I have mixed feelings about it. So to give you a bit of history, so I came to the UK when I was 10 years old, and I don't remember it being a big deal in the UK, or even a minor deal. So I came in 2001. So Black History Month wasn't really a thing. So I think it's only been recently, maybe 2012. From then onwards, I think people made a fuss about it. And I think maybe not necessarily, but it feels to me that it came from the UK side, the US side of things. So that was inspired by the US Black History Month celebrations. So as for me, how I feel about it, when I was younger, from 10 onwards, I wasn't a fan of it, I have to say, because I did not see the point of why do we need a month to, I don't know, why do we need a specific point to celebrate our history when Black History Month should be just the norm? It's our history. We don't need to be told this is a specific time where you now have to commemorate your history. And I think it kind of, I don't know how to say it, but it kind of makes it feel as if Black history is from a singular viewpoint, if you know what I mean, where it ignores that there's such diversity within Blackness, and it still tries to fit Blackness or Black history into a monolithic history, where it's like, so we wouldn't celebrate European history, for example. You've got the British history, you've got the Welsh history, whatever, you've got all the different histories. So then why is it necessary to then say it's Black history? Which Black history are you talking about? So that's where I was from. I didn't articulate it that well when I was younger, but that's
an interesting point, though.
Yeah. So that's where my feelings came from when I was young, because I thought, okay, I'm coming from Zimbabwe, and we have our own history, but I'm not seeing that history within the Black History Month. So does that then mean our Blackness, in quotation marks, are not Black enough for us to be seen as Black? Yeah. And then, so for example, if we look at if we're to celebrate Black History Month, would we not celebrate the Nigerian side of it, the Ghanaian side of it, all these other things? And so, and even as a joke, like if we were, Nigeria would swallow up everyone else's history. So then it's like, well, okay, so so for me, that's what it means, like exactly what is Black history. But as I'm getting older, and as I'm getting more integrated into UK life instead of Zimbabwe, I'm now, which is quite sad, I'm now maybe kind of divorced or divorcing, in the process of divorcing from my Zimbabwean Blackness, if that makes sense. I'm now Black British instead of Zimbabwean, or Black Zimbabwean, if you would say that. So now I realize that children may not be taught by their parents Black history of where you come from. So maybe it is necessary to have a month that tells kids there's more to history than white history or English history.
Right.
But then at the same time, I don't like that it's so focused on slavery. And I think there is more to Black history than slavery. Talk to us about, for example, if I go like Buyanehanda, which is like a Zimbabwean fighter, Stella Twish, all these other people that we could talk about. But then I think where I land today, what I think about Black History Month is, I think is the responsibility of Black families, so to speak, to talk about their history, their specific history. So then I cannot teach a child about Nigerian history because I don't know about Nigerian history, but I can tell them about Zimbabwean history, the little bit I know about. So then it also puts me, like it puts a weight on me to kind of know about my own history before I can teach it to someone else. And yes, so I've been going on about.
No, it's okay. There's the idea is you
just
talk
have a
about it. But
conversation.
yeah, that's I think like it's interesting though. The Black History Month in the UK was inspired by Black History Month in the US. It started 11 years after the US, so it was inspired by the idea of Black History Month in the US. You mentioned like it doesn't include the, because blackness is not one. I think that's something we'll be talking about eventually. Eventually. It's not a one-time discussion. So I think we'll feature a lot of that topic on the podcast eventually. One of the co-founders, he's Ghanaian, and what you mentioned about like it not representing African culture, you don't see like your culture in it. So that's that I don't know, called out to me somehow, because like that's a strong point, because I think even though he was Ghanaian and he was trying to kind of create a place for Black people, like I don't know if that was a concern or a thought that they had at that time, back in the 1980s. But I think also that might also kind of lead on to like the next question, which is why BHM Black History Month was started in the first place. And it was that Black people were being divorced from, or they were running or shrinking away from their Black identity as African. They didn't want to be considered African.
So can I just quote, because you say Black people were running from their history as Africans, but what about Afro-Caribbean people?
Now that was one of the issues, because according to there was an interview he did with the Black History Month organization in the UK, and one of the things he mentioned was that Black people Africans did not want to be seen as African, and even Afro-Caribbeans were offended if you called them African. So that was the experience, his experience in the 1980s. You moved here when you were 10, you went to school here. What was your experience like as an African, as a Black African, living in the UK, growing up in the UK, in school in the UK? How did you feel about your identity as a Black African?
Okay, well, interesting. I'm laughing because I think it has two different aspects of it.
Right.
So then I would say I'm not your stereotypical Black person in that I'm not, because I have to kind of caveat that. So
I was going to ask what's the stereotypical Black?
So I think again, so from even within my own people, I'm seen as quiet and I'm introverted more to an extent, and I think the typical, when you think of a Black woman, you think of
I
extroverted.
mean, stereotypically, it
Yeah,
doesn't.
stereotypically.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah. So stereotypically, or the image that you think of, like, oh, when you think black woman, it's like, oh, this is what I think. So then you have she's is it just like louder than life. She's the life of the party. She's this. So then I'm the opposite of that. I'm quite quiet. I'm quite nerdy, some would say, and I'm quite studious, I think, and I like I like rules. And from a young age, even from Zim, I used to like reading, and people told me that's weird. Like, what are you doing? So I have to.
So, wait, growing up in Zimbabwe, people felt it was weird that you read all the time.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's because of maybe we weren't rich, if that makes sense. We weren't poor, but we weren't rich. We're quite middle, yeah. So then, so I remember I just used to love reading. And my mum would tell you that's one of the things. Oh, Tari used to like reading, and then so if we'd go on holiday or something, I'll take a book to my grandmother's house, but you can't read during the night because the lights are out, whatever. So then during the day when all the cousins will be playing, I'll be like, oh, I just want to read my book. So anyway, so then we'll put a caveat to that. So then when I came to the UK, I was, there's also again, I think at the time it was the stereotypical black person would fit into the Caribbean, maybe grouping. I don't know if that makes sense, where it's like, oh, if you think black, he'll be a representative, will be a Caribbean person. That's what people would think of. Like, so the Caribbeans, they usually, not everyone, but stereotypically, again, they'll be loud, they'll be this. So then you don't fit into that. So then when you come into school, you'd have, I always laugh with one of my friends that I was called an Oreo, and I didn't know what that was, or a coconut, where it's like you're black on the inside, you're white in the inside. And it's like, well, what makes me white? And it's like, oh, you like to read, you're quiet, you don't like this type of music. So then as a student, one of the things that I found difficult was that it wasn't. So again, this is kind of going off on a tangent, but I'll come back to this point.
It's fine. Sorry.
Yeah. So it was like, you have people have this idea of what blackness should be, and then you don't fit into this, and then they come and tell you that this is how you're meant to be, but then you're like, well, I've grown up in a country where a majority of the people are black, and it's just people just have different personalities. So for me coming here when I was 10, I think I was quite emotionally mature for my age. Self-congratulations. But that's what I thought. Whereas I kind of understood, I had a sense of my own identity. Well, I was just like, this is who I am. And blackness did not enter into that. It's just being black is who I am. So then as a student, I found it was quite isolating because I like to study. I like to work hard. That's one of the things I knew. Like, again, coming from Zimbabwe, it was like, hard work will get you there. So then you just go to the top of your class. Like, I've always been in the top 10 of my class. That's what I've always done. So then coming here, I found the school, especially in year 6, it was really easy. I was just like, okay, bang, I've got this. So then you realize like, you're not meant to be that. So it wasn't from other people. It's from my own peers, I'd say. So then...
Sorry, when you say your own peers, you mean like other black people?
I start because I went to so in my year
Africans.
Yeah, no. So from other students. So in my year, I was I think in primary school I was the only black girl there, and then in my high school there was quite a few of us, but they were mainly Caribbean. They weren't African. But then the Caribbeans weren't really academic in that sense. So then they tell you you're not black because you don't fit into this. So then studying, I found trying to find the right balance where it's like, okay, well, I know at school you work hard. At school you don't play about. At school you don't mess about. Because if you do, you have to answer at home. So then at school they're telling me, school was fine. The teachers and everyone was fine. It wasn't an issue. It was the other students, the other blackness. I couldn't fit into the blackness. And then when other African people came, they were then trying to fit into the Caribbean representation or the Caribbean lifestyle, I'll say, at school as much as it could be, where it's allowed. It's like stereotypical black people would own the space. In that sense, we own the music, we own the culture, we set the trend of the school. But then I'm not that. I want to just go sit down and read somewhere. And then you realize like, oh, you don't see me as a student, other black students, you don't see me as being one of you. But then the white students would laugh because I don't fit in with the idea of the blackness, where it's like, oh, you're not fitting in either camp. So then you're just, so I found it quite isolating to be honest at school. So I went to, so when I came to the UK, I just had to go into any high school that would take me. So I went to quite, it wasn't a very academic school, let's put it that way. So then I felt like, oh, this is, and I thirst for knowledge. And then you're going to school with people that don't quite know it. And some of them, the education wasn't prioritized. So then you'd be the only person that's done their homework. You'd be the only person that's like, that's striving to learn more. Like, okay, what about this? You're asking questions. And then people, they just come to school was just a time for them to just, we're here, that's what we do. But for me, it was like, I am, and I think I kind of knew again that I am privileged to be in a place where my parents are not having to pay school fees. So this is amazing. So I would then take the opportunity to like, let me do something. But then I was in a school that I think didn't nurture my, like my academic hunger. I don't know that maybe that's the right word. So so as a student in the UK, I found it isolating, and I think that was because, which is actually quite a sad thing about schools, where they don't expect much from their students, and it's like from certain areas it's just like, oh, we're just going to keep you in school, but we're not going to push you to do better. And then that was the school I was put in, and I don't think for me at that time my blackness in that aspect played a part apart from the students. I had teachers, maybe they'll say like, oh, I like how you black girls do your hair or something, but I had I think even the people that influenced my life were like we had an English teacher, one name just in case she does listen to this one day, but she had high expectations for her students, and she was my form tutor, so she kind of pushed me to do like, okay, I recognize there's something in you, so let's push you. So then I was part of like the gifted and talented pool at school, but then
wow, okay.
of course, but they didn't know what to do with us. And even like I laugh and whatever, but I used to play violin. And then, but that was something I picked up, and I was just, I wanted to learn it. But then after a while, it's just like, my mom said I couldn't play. She was like, you're making noise. This is actually a funny story. Like on parents' evening, she asked my music teacher, when is she going to get better? And I was like, okay, mom, I can take it. But anyway, I was one of the only few people that did it, and it wasn't encouraged. But whereas where if you went to like my sister or my brother's school, they went to different schools, this was the sort of thing that was encouraged. So then I would say maybe one of my, if I'd say my commentary on the UK education system was it doesn't have much expectations for the lower working class, which is what my school was. So I think because of that, class played a part more than race in in my education in the UK. So that's what I found I found it isolating. And then when I went to uni, when I went to college again, I went to it was, I think knowledge wasn't rewarded, and it wasn't until like maybe uni that I kind of felt like, I found my people, I'm being pushed, and I'm kind of wanting things, and it makes me wonder, could I have been more if I had been at a different school? I don't know, but so
All right.
yeah.
So you didn't. There was no instance of you feeling like, oh, you wanted to be more of one side or the other side. It was just
Like more of what one side? Which side do you mean?
I think like the commentary so far is that like the Africans did not wanted to be less African. In fact, all black people wanted to be less African.
Yeah.
So you didn't ever feel any pressure to be like you wanted to be less African.
No, but because I think that's what I was saying. I was quite mature enough that I knew like I am Zimbabwean, and I think because I take pride in that this is who I am. You cannot separate. You can take the girl out of the village, but you can't take the village out of her. Yeah. I know, like I think that's even one of the things to this day that I'm quite adamant about. Like if I were to have any future children, I would want to take them to the village where my grandfather is buried, or because I know where my grandfather is. This is where we started. Because I think when I was young, I was always going back to the village and whatever, and I know this is where I come from. So then, you might not like me, or you might not like my Africanness, but I am an African. I am Zimbabwean. Before I'm anything else. So then I think because I knew that, I was like, well, I can't pretend to be anything else. I'm Zimbabwean. So anything else. Why would I pretend to be otherwise? Which is actually quite funny because I worked with somebody who was pretending to be South African, but they were Zimbabwean. And I was like, but we know. And then also on the flip side, I actually said, I said to this, he was okay. He was in the Caribbean somewhere. I can't remember what island. But then I made a joke because I'm quite. I think I'm funny, so
okay.
I made a joke about.
If you say so.
Yeah, I am. But I made a joke about African or something. He was like, he actually was not happy. He was like, I'm not African, and even he was, and then
South Africa is Africa.
No, but so this was a different one. So we had Zimbabwean pretending to be a South African, which was quite common around the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And then so when I got older, when I was maybe 20, I was working in a hospital, and there was a Caribbean man. And then I kind of like just said, oh, but we're all African. He was not having it. He was like, no. And I was like, oh, sorry, my bad. And even on the flip side, he did not want to. Because I also said, oh, he was Jamaican, I remember. And then I was like, oh, so you class yours. Because I can say, yes, I am maybe Black, British, whatever, but I'm still Zimbabwean to core. Like, I'm Zimbabwean. So then I assume that everyone else around me is like that. Like, oh, yeah, you can be born and bred here, but you're still Jamaican. And he was not. He was like, no, I'm British. And I was just like, oh, my bad. So that was quite an interesting thing when you realize like there's people that see maybe
the identity is not what you on the surface. So which is interesting because you just assume everyone's African. Because for me, I'm pro-African. I'm always like not everyone's African, but everyone's proud to be African. And then you realize like when that is not the case. And there's some people who take pride in the fact that they don't eat the I know there were some people there was a phase where people were like, oh, I don't eat sadza. And you're like, okay. And I just assumed that, oh, every Zimbabwean eats sadza at home. But then there's some people like, oh, I don't eat sadza. I don't know how to cook sadza. And you're like, excuse you? What do you mean? And then for me, I was just like, that's offensive. And people who take pride that they don't speak Shona or whatever, or even Debet or whatever language when they come from Zimbabwe. And I think, well, that's all good and dandy, but you're still, you can, do you know what I mean? Like we can, like, what's the word? Like, what's the word? Like when you get used to a place, or when you, what's the word? No. Acclimatize.
Maybe, but that's not what I'm thinking. Yeah, we'll go with that one. Where you can be part of the culture, you can be, but you're still to this day. And do you know? Okay, sorry, I'm going on different tangent, but this is actually an interesting story, which kind of helped kind of cement my beliefs. We're doing so I used to go to a church that used to be really big on evangelizing. So then you'd go so it was the Queen's Jubilee or something, the Queen's whatever. So then the church was like, okay, go now give out this book, which shall remain anonymous, give out this book to people celebrate, to get the Jubilee and to get people just talking about Christ. And then so I was talking to this black man. He must have been Caribbean, and I don't know what we're talking about. And he said that there ain't black in the Union Jack. And I was just like, that's such an interesting take. Because for me, I'm like, oh, you refuse to have anything to do with this country, like, but you're refusing to go back to your own country, like in the sense where it's like you're out here, you're so unhappy, but you don't want to leave. And I was just like, well, for me, that kind of gives us the idea that, you know what, I might never go back to Zimbabwe, but I'll never be taken out. And I think I said it before, like, I'll never be taken out of Zimbabwe. So whilst I'm here, I should take pride and fly the flag of Zimbabwe and be like, yes, I'm pro whatever. And even in the same, okay, I'm going around in tangents, but I'll continue. And even in the same sense, like any African country that I come across, I'll champion that as well. So for example, in the World Cup, like where I used to work before, we used to do like during the World Cup, we do a sweepstake, and then people will be like, oh, what country are you supporting? So I'll be like, I'll support England, but any African country, I'll be behind them.
No, of course.
Yeah, and then people will be like, oh, but you're supporting this other one. I was like, oh, they're African, it doesn't matter, I'll support. That's where I am. So I think so to kind of bring it back to the question, I never felt isolated at school. I always took pride in my Africanness. And I think that for me, that maybe helped me because I had my own sense of identity before, and I didn't have outsiders telling me this is what you're meant to be. That's not to say that I kind of had like I faltered sometimes, and you're trying to be like, okay, I'm trying to relax my hair, I'm trying to do the weaves. For me, that's what it was, and I'm just like, I'm trying to fit in. And I think maybe that came more from the hormones where you're like, oh, I want to be found attractive, and what the girl that's found attractive, she's got straight hair, she's got all this, so maybe if I do this, I can be seen as sexy, I can be seen. But that was just me trying to fit in with, that was a peer pressure, but being my identity never changed, and it was never questioned in that sense, and I don't think I allowed anyone to question it. So you could have your own crisis, but mine was cemented in, I'm Zimbabwean, I am Tari, and I know where I come from, this village, and these are my people. And I think maybe that's something I take pride in. I take pride in knowing where you come from, and nobody else will take that from you. So if you know where you come from, you can't take that from me. That's where my people are from. So whatever you have to say is like, okay, thank you. And maybe in a weird way, I'll never be part of this country, but because I know where my country is, I'm okay with it. So who knows?
All right, that's interesting. That's an interesting take, and I think like what you mentioned about the trying to fit in by like relaxing your hair and trying to fit a beauty standard. That I think it's a completely different topic, and we'll get to that eventually. But like, yeah, I think that was interesting. I would just put a note, and then yeah, at some point in the future, we'll definitely come back to that. But like, I think in recent years, there's been I think in the last year, no, actually last few years, actually, at least in terms of music, in music and culture that's been coming out of Africa, it feels or it appears like Africa and Africans are becoming a lot cooler to the world. We are now more presentable.
Can we just say Nigerians?
Yeah, it's Africa, but like
Yeah.
I led by Nigeria.
Yeah.
I'm becoming more cool. It's cool to identify as, oh, I'm African, because I'm a piano, and there's all the culture coming out, jollof rice coming out of Africa. Do you feel like there's been a change in how you're perceived as African, or how Africa is perceived? You mentioned like the Jamaican fellow you talked about. Was that recently, or do you feel like the whole perception has changed?
I think definitely yes. Because I think is it early noughties and then the early tens? I don't know what that is. Is that whatever, the early 2000s? It was definitely was not cool to be African. But I think, and I joke, but I think Nigerians, because they take pride in who they are. You can tell a Nigerian from far away. You can hear them. No offense, but you can, and they're just so loud.
Some offense not taken, but okay.
But they're just so loud and unashamed. And I think that helps. So you had like I know Yoshiris, she's Nigerian, yeah. So you had them, and had like those TV shows like Little Miss Jocelyn. They were African, and they made it kind of like, this is who we are, and let's laugh about things. And like, I used to love Little Miss Jocelyn. I think she had a skit where she dressed up as a like white face, and then she'd go to a shop and she'd be like, "You can't kick me out, I'm white." And it was so like not politically correct at all, but that kind of showed. I think it showcased African talent, and then so it just made like these people are. They're just trailblazers. They do what they want. So then,
sorry, sorry for interrupting, but do you feel like those comics, those portrayals, made Africans just a laughing stock and not taken seriously?
No, I think it opened the door, because usually you'd have the I think in the space of like TV, it would be the Caribbeans that would be doing something. So then this came, like you got the Lenny Henrys, all those people, but this kind of opened up, like Gina Yashiri, like she was hilarious, and I think she was unashamedly African, and all the things that she did, that Nigerian accent. And then some people, there's always going to be some people who take things and they kind of make it into whatever racist thing. But she made it like, hey, this is who we are, and we're here. And then you could see like, oh, this woman's funny. Oh, there's Africans. So I think she definitely paved the way. So then you could, do you know when people talk about visibility, so then you could be like, I know people in my life that can speak like her. Do you know what I mean? Like, and then it's like you take pride in, hey, we're actually on TV. Hey, we're
Yeah,
doing this.
yeah.
And then so you have like, I joked to myself, like, Dibanj, Oliver Twist. Again, that was such a big song, but I think it kind of paved the way. And then you had people, and I think social media also helped
Yeah.
in the sense that like people could showcase their talent, they could do all sorts. And then I don't know what the change, maybe it was like a different generation of Africans in the UK. They are not, they weren't trying to fit into the Caribbean, like into the Caribbean idea of blackness. They were here and they're like, we're Africans and we're here. So I think, yeah, so definitely that has changed now. And I think, yeah, you've got, because even like if we take an idea of hair again, that way now it's quite normal to have black girls with unrelaxed hair and they just have their afros out here at school and whatever. Back in my school days, that would not have been the case. But then you're seeing blackness, yeah, so yeah, blackness just being like,
True to form.
yeah, it's just like it is, and then just like we're not trying to fit into we're not trying to fit into something. It's just like we're here and this is what it is. And I think there's definitely been some growth. Yeah, where it's like being African is just like it's the state of being. It's another thing. We still have to fight the idea that Africa is a country, and this and
At
we-
some point,
yeah,
we'll get that message across.
yeah. So, but the first battle has been one. I think is like Africa is now on the map, and you see we've got talent, we've got actors, and you've got like, yeah. So even in the movies as well, you've got African talent coming through. You've got music coming through. You've got all these. So then it's like, yeah, all the, because I think maybe our disadvantage or whatever you want to say is like the idea of blackness for so long has been the American idea of blackness. So then it's like everyone has to kind of fit into this hip hoppy image of blackness. But then Africans came and they brought something else with it, and they're just like, now what? Here we are. So yeah, so I think, yeah, definitely Africa is cool. Being African is quite cool these days.
Okay. I think again it's talking about how people are trying to. I think I don't know who it is that said it. That the most imitated person in the world is the Black American man, and yeah, I think that is correct because that's for a long time that's what a lot of black people try to fit into who we see the Black American man is on TV, all the Timberlands and baggy jeans. I remember
Yeah.
growing up, like that was basically everything we had. You wanted to do you strived to become basically the Black American man. But movements like Black History Month also started from the US. Black History Month, there's Black Lives Matter as well. Based on what you know about movements like these, um, do you think that they are still relevant in current society?
Mm, oh, I'm gonna be on the fence, and I'm gonna say yes and no. And the reason why, I think like, so if we do, because even if we take Black History Month for example, I think yes, it was inspired by the from the US, and that's good. But then we have to kind of think like the people in the Black Americans, they are quite monolithic in that sense. Like they don't have different. You know what I mean? They kind of have a shared okay, that might sound ignorant, but they have kind of like a shared starting point.
Right.
Whereas black people in the UK, it's a different method. So you've got black people from the Caribbean who've got a history like the Windrush and all those kind of that kind of history, and they came here and they still have some of the scars from when they first came over, and there was some racism. And then now you have the black Africans who are coming in, and they're coming from maybe colonized countries as well. So then they have their own history, they have their own things. And then there was also the tribal side of things where you can have the same people from the same country, but they might not get on. And then,
I think it's sorry. I
another,
think it's the same in the US. Though you have like the Black Caribbeans in the US as well who came in. Then there's the Africans who were introduced as slaves as well. I think I was reading. I don't know. I saw something about the comedian. What's his name? Michael Blackson. about how when he got to the US and Black Americans, I don't know if that was a joke.
He's Nigerian.
He's Nigerian, yeah, and the Black Americans referred to him as black. They told him he was as black as under the bed.
That's that's rude. But okay.
Yeah, I don't know if that was his kid, but like that's.
It might
but
have exaggerated,
I think there's some truth to him saying that. So I think maybe there's some similarities between like the US and the UK,
which
though.
is what I meant. Like, it was, So then you've got maybe I don't want to say natives, but that's what it sounds like. Where you've got like, so that's what I mean. Like, where you've got the Black Caribbeans in the UK and the Black Americans in the US, where it's like they have their own history and their own something, and the same here where we're coming in. And then for us then, so in the UK to then lump, like I was saying at the start, like to lump Black History Month as just one, like, oh, here's your little thing. And then it's like, it's going to feed all of us. Whereas, like, I think I remember from a point, like we've said it, where Caribbean people did not want to be insulted by being called African. Like, that would be the biggest insult. Like, you're an African, that would be the biggest insult to the Caribbean person. And even vice versa, like, you're turning, because I always used to be like, there was the fear of our parents, like, you'll be turning into the Caribbean people, like, you'll be turning into this. And then it's like, we have different histories in the way we see ourselves. So to give us just 1 month for us, I'm like, it's good. But, so even as an example, like, the 1 year I was like, okay, let me buy into the whole Black History Month. Let me celebrate it. And so I went to a few events in Birmingham where I used to live at the time. And it was mainly, I would not say that was Black History. It was Caribbean History Month or Black Caribbean History Month. And that's what it was. It was like, maybe we'll sprinkle a little bit of Africanness, maybe one event that has African vibes. And I don't know if it's because it was in Birmingham. But then I was just like, I'm supposed to be celebrating Black History Month, but all I've done is look at the strife and the struggle of Black Caribbeans in the UK. And I empathize, of course, but I'm like, well, I want to see some African history that does not involve slavery. And then so I kind of round up to stop going over and over. But
it's all right. Yeah, I think it's important to the discussion. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So then I think so these movements, I think they do play an important part. So for example, I think PLM and all these things have kind of helped amplify like Black voices, and people are now more able to say a lot of things. But then at the same time, my personal belief, is my opinion, that I think it's like we can't just take what happens to the US and then bring it over to the UK, because I think there's two completely different histories, different like working off the machine. Like I think the UK, there's more class-based issues, whereas like you can have middle-class Black people and working class Black people. They're two different things. So I think that's one of the things that kind of led to the divide into, okay, so when you've got Africans that come into the UK, they work, they do all this, and they kind of elevate. They're more middle class. Not everyone, but the majority. Whereas like some of the people that have been here for a while, they tend to be on a certain maybe working class and whatever. So then it's like that's a different way of thinking, and it's just like, so I think it's important to have them, but at the same time we can't fully embrace American movements and then just say we're just going to lift them and then bring them to the UK, because I think it's unfair. And I think it's it kind of waters down some of the struggles that they have in the US, and then you're trying to bring it here and you think, well, it might not work exactly like it. Yeah, there's things to be there's things that we can need to work on in the US. This is not a good example considering what's just happened with is it Chris K, but like the policeman who shot an Black man. But one of the things I was like in like when BLM was protesting the shooting of an unarmed Black man, it was like here people be shouting here like, oh, don't shoot something, don't shoot something. And then you're like, well, the majority of the UK police don't have guns. So that doesn't even make sense. You can't just say the same slogans that they're shouting over in the US, because that doesn't apply to here. But here you could talk about different things that affect Black people in a different way. So let's talk about maybe stop and search when they're especially in London and whatever. But then at the same time, you have to look at that. Okay, so if the majority of like knife victims or stabbing victims are young Black men, surely then there has to be, do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, yeah, we can't just lift and whatever. We have to then have different ways we can kind of solve some of the issues that we're experiencing. So just kind of stop myself going round and round the circles. I think the question would be, yes, I think they're still relevant. But then I think we have to then look at different stratas of be like, okay, maybe there's an institutional level, and then there's more like an economic level as well. And then there's also looking at the problems that people come in when they can't, like first generation families, when maybe the parents don't speak English and they're relying on the child to translate. So then the child goes to school and they're not, they have to translate that they're basically in trouble. And you're like, well, what kind of child is going to tell the truth and be like, oh yeah, the teacher said I was talking too much. Do you know what I mean? Whereas I'm guessing in America, some of the most of them, they speak the same language. You know what I mean? Like they speak English, and then you have black teachers. You have this. You have you know what I mean? Yeah. Whereas here, you might be the only black child. Maybe not so much, but then you'll be like the only black child in a school. And it's like some of those issues that you'd face would not be the same issues that you face in the US. Okay. So so I definitely think they're still relevant. But I think in the UK you'd have to have different, like really specific. And if we want to make a difference, in my opinion, we need to kind of stop looking at Black America to be the leader of the black majority black, or I don't know what that means, but stop looking at the US to be the leaders of black conversations in the UK. I think the UK is quite nuanced, and we need to then, if we're going to look at solutions, we then need to look at them and say, okay, we need to have a UK eye on it, and this is how we can resolve our issues, but let's not just follow America. So that's me.
Okay, I think yeah, that's right. But I think not but, and I think it's not because I think that's what the Black History Month organization in the UK does. It kind of I think because I'm not fully familiar with what they do, but I think that's what they do in getting that idea. When as soon as the idea started from in 1987, they've kind of tailored it to the requirements of the UK. So it's more about experiences of Black people here. So I think that's good, and it's basically what you're saying. So so I think that's definitely good for the culture and Black identity in the UK. I think to round up, what would you have to say in general about Black identity in general as a Black person, as an African in the UK?
Oh gosh. That's a big question.
Putting you on the hot seat right there.
Okay, so can you repeat the question again so I can really get it and answer?
All right, so the idea is just this is to round up, like in summary, if you had to say, if you had to tell a younger person, Black person about about their identity as a Black person in the UK, what would you say to someone?
I would say quite controversially. I don't think we can define that Blackness as an identity. I personally believe that we are people at the end of the day. So then you can be whatever you want, as long as you're true to your values, your core values, and what what you value. So then I would say to a young Black person, be free to explore the things that you want to explore. Go swimming, go hiking, do it. If you want to do it, because there is no right or wrong way to be Black. To be Black is to be who you are, and I think for me it's I think it's disingenuous to try and tell people that there's only one way to be a Black, to be a Black. We're not a monolith, so then it's like so what can I say to a person to be? This is how you be Black. Be Black is just being who you are. So I don't think there's only that would be my advice, is to be. Just be who you are. Enjoy life. We only have the one life. So why are we limiting it to Black people don't do this? So it's like, yes, Black people do that. They do.
They do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much for joining me on this very early episode of the Black Side podcast. That was Tari Rusere. Like you said, thank you again for joining us. Hopefully, you can join us again in the future when we're doing more interesting episodes like this one. And to you, thank you for listening. And yeah, catch you on the next episode.
Catch you on the black side.
Oh, wow. All right. Yeah. Bye. Coming up on the next episode of the Black Side podcast, movements like Black History Month relevant to Black people in the UK?
I think that to some extent there is some relevance for some people. But I think that Black History Month is useless for the vast majority of us. And when I say us, I mean black folk.
That's next time on the Black Side podcast. This episode was mixed and produced by me, Chukwudi Barrah, and our guest was Tari Rusere. The theme music was Welcome to Africa by Nexto. You can find and subscribe to the Black Side podcast on your favorite podcast platform, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and more. And follow the podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Thread, or TikTok. Additional links and notes mentioned in the episode will be available on blackside.uk/conversations. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to Africa, where the music is good. Welcome to Africa, it's the land of your roots. Welcome to Africa, we are so beautiful. Welcome to Africa.